Again, good morning. I'm Kevin Jones with the Washington State Golf Association. Colin Westwood's also on the line. He will be helping along as you got questions to utilize that chat window inside your browser if you have questions along the way. And with that, we're going to spend the next, we've allocated for 2 hours, but hopefully we'll be done here in about an hour and a half. And the point of this webinar is to give you a brief overview of the USGA handicapping system, some changes that have occurred for this new cycle 18-19, leading into the 2020 World Handicapping System. There was a big announcement from the USGA literally a day or two ago. So we won't touch base too much on that, but there's a lot of changes coming to the system. But we want to make sure you are ready for this golf season and use this as a refresher for your club activities. So with that, we've kind of already gone over the agenda. We're just kind of hit up the major points of the USGA handicapping system, and so that you as a handicap chair and your committees are ready for the season. There will be a 5-minute break about halfway through this seminar. Just we want to break it up because it is a lot of information, and we will be moving quickly through it. And then lastly, like I said, please use your chat window on the right-hand side. If you do have any questions, we will answer those at the end of this webinar. So continue to answer those. Colin will answer to either, or we'll take them at the end. All right, with that, let's get into the major topics of the day. So we want to talk about how a handicap index is calculated. We want to address Section 3-5. We've been promoting this for years in order to allow people to have a fair net match while playing from different tees. We are all about inclusion here. We want as many golfers out there to be able to compete and have fun, and Section 3-5 allows you to do that. We'll be talking about adjusting hole scores. This is around Section 4-1 and 4-2, what to do when you pick up on a hole or you not finish some holes, and what's the proper procedures. And then also we want to talk about the handicap committee as itself, what its role, what the committee should be doing, and things that you can do, especially when action is needed, when some players kind of sends red flags about how they're operating. So with that, let's jump right into Section 1, the purpose and requirements. So as we know, the purpose of the USGA Handicap System is to make the game more enjoyable by enabling golfers of different abilities to compete on an equitable basis. That's been the guiding light for this for many, many years. I mean, what's great about the game of golf is that we have a system that allows us to play against every ability. You don't see that in a lot of sports. That's what makes golf really truly a great game across different ages and different abilities. A lot of sports, if you're playing basketball, there's no way to handicap that. So we're thankful and we're lucky to have a system like this so that we can go out there and play against somebody regardless of their ability on the golf course. The basic premise guiding the USGA Handicap System really is twofold, is that every player, to the best of their ability, will score on every hole in every round, and that also there's the ability for peer review. This is really important that people play with others and post their scores in a quick manner so that people can go into the system and evaluate whether something was actually posted or is posted correctly. I think really these two guiding lights surrounds, I would say the biggest principles of the game of golf, and that is honesty and integrity. As long as we do our best and we forcefully record what we did and do that in an honest manner, then the handicap system works exactly how it's supposed to. All right, what is a handicap index? It's issued by a licensed golf association or a golf club through its member clubs. So in this case, the USGA licenses us, the WSGA, to provide handicaps to our member clubs, which we do. So when you guys, the member clubs, join us, the WSGA, we give you the license to be able to issue official USGA handicap indexes. And those handicap indexes are then numbers all the way down to the 10th decimal place. A handicap ICSO is issued only to individuals who are members of a licensed golf club. This is important as we will touch base on this question right here. An individual pays their yearly club dues in January. In June, they resign their membership due to a job relocation. How would you handle this situation? So here's the answer. Since they are no longer a member of the golf club, they must either be deleted or inactivated prior to the next handicap revision. A handicap is issued to only individuals who are members of a licensed golf club. So to that point, when you join the WSGA through some club, your membership is good for the calendar year from January 1 to December 31st. But in the case of this situation, if somebody from your club physically leaves, and let's say they move to another state, or under the other circumstances that they are deceased, that person is physically no longer a member of your golf club. And so in that situation, you must inactivate them from your club or delete them from your club because they have no business with your club and going forward. This is really the only situation where you would inactivate somebody mid-season. In any other situation, we would have them remain through the full year because they paid their dues through the WSGA through the December 31st. So just keep in mind, if somebody physically leaves your club altogether, then they should not be part of your roster going forward. All right, section 2, definitions. A golf club. So what is a golf club? A golf club is organized of at least 10 individual members. They operate under bylaws with a handicap committee. What's important here is that at WSGA, Colin Westwood has done a lot of work to make sure that all proper paperwork is in place for each of our clubs. It is asked and demanded from the USGA as a responsibility that we have to the USGA as a WSGA from our association. And then we need to trickle that down to you guys, the clubs. So that is important that we make sure that we meet all licensing requirements, and that if you have any changes to your handicap chair, your bylaws, or anything else that may have to do with the structure of your club, please reach out to us immediately and provide us that additional paperwork so that we can put that on file, so that when questions arise or if there was an audit to be had, we would have the proper paperwork in place for your individual club. A golf club has a responsibility to supervise golf activities. This is important because we need, within club, depending on the size, a golf club is responsible for making sure that there is enough organized events so that everybody has an equal opportunity within the club to participate in those. There needs to be enough to meet the total number of your clubs. So if your club has a high number of members, then you need to provide enough events and entries to meet that total level of membership. That's important because, as we talked about before, a golf course, a club has a responsibility of facilitating peer review so that each member has an equal opportunity to play with each other. Just like I said, talking about peer review, that really does tie into the golf activities. Golf clubs need promoting peer review. So once again, opportunities for people within the club to play amongst each other so that they can make sure that everybody is utilizing the USGA Handicap System properly. And then lastly, makes very much sense that the golf club has the responsibility of maintaining the integrity of that USGA Handicap System, and that's where our handicap chairs and our committees become extremely important in that effort. All right, how to obtain a handicap index. So like we talked about before, handicap index is must be formed from an authorized golf club with posted adjusted gross scores. So once again, we give you the license to authorize USGA Handicap Index from us, the WSGA, And then when people post those adjusted gross scores, that will then be able to, people will be able to attain the handicap index. A player must have at least 5 18-hole scores in the system in order to be eligible for handicap index, and then that will be calculated at the next revision. All right, handicap index is the USGA service mark used to indicate a measurement of a player's potential ability on a course of standard playing difficulty. It is expressed as a number taken to the 1 decimal place, which we talked about before. So a lot of people view this as an average. That's not technically correct. The word you want to really talk to your members about is that a handicap index is a measurement of potential. It's not an average. What we're trying to ascertain is what to the max level is somebody capable of playing on a given day. Because handicap is when you when people say that I shoot their handicap index, well, in reality is that's only supposed to happen a certain amount of time, and we'll address that later down the seminar. It's not supposed to happen all the time, because if that were the case, then your handicap index is not correctly determining your potential ability. So we'll have this conversation a little bit more, but just remember it's not an average. It's a judgment of a person's potential ability. All right, once again, peer review. Peer review is the ability of golfers to gain an understanding of a player's potential ability. Like we spoke about, we just want to be able to have the ability for people to play amongst each other and actually see if those scores are being posted correctly. We want to be able to say, hey, something doesn't look right, or that person's exactly right, that's what they posted, I can see it in there, there's no issue. So like I said, it all is about honesty and integrity. As long as the player does their part, peer review should be a very natural process, and there should be no issues for a handicap committee to take up in the future. So 2 essential elements with peer review. Members of a golf club must have a reasonable, regular opportunity to play together. We've already spoke to this. And then lastly, that access must be provided to the scoring records of those members with the pertinent information for them to review those scores. I think what's nice is that we live in an internet age, so that information is very much viewable, whether it's on the club, at the handicap computers that we provide to you. You can also go to gin.com. You can utilize our own website, the WSGA.org, or even use your Gin mobile app to look up a lot of this information. So there's many places to go find that. So I think peer review becomes a lot easier discussion because of so many places that we can check in on a member. All right, tournament scores. A tournament score is a score made by a competition organized and conducted by the committee in charge of the competition. Competition must identify a member, and based on stipulated rounds, it must be played under the rules of golf. So what's important about tournament scores is that they are officially organized events by some committee. Doesn't necessarily have to be by a club. That could also be us as an association. There's many different levels of tournaments. But what's the most important here is that when a tournament score is to be issued, that it needs to be clearly expressed to its members before the beginning of competition. It should be very much known to the public that this is happening. So we ask that if one of your events is officially a T-score, then please announce that, whether that's on the first tee or in some publication beforehand, so that the players have that information and know that that's what should be going on to their handicap record. So there was back in 2016, we had a very large conversation about what actually should be a T-score. This kind of changed in the handicap system, and we've done a pretty good job. And what I like is this diagram that is in your USGA Handicap manual that clearly kind of gives you some guidance on what should and what shouldn't be a T-score designation. For the purposes of this webinar, you should be concerned with the right-hand side of this chart for club events, so that when you have league competitions or when you have your Tuesday morning group, things that happen on a routine basis, that are on a consistent basis, those should not be your tournament scores. Your tournament scores should be competitions that have some rich in tradition, that occur once a year that you guys keep coming back to that. So a club championship is the easiest and most definable T-score out there. But it could be amongst a lot of other things. Your President's Cup, member guest, maybe you have your annual best ball that everybody attends to that kind of meets that criteria. The ideal number usually is 3 to 5 a year, like I said, but that's a general guideline. You may have more, you may have less. I would just ask that if you do have any questions about what should be a T-score and what should not, please call our offices and we will definitely help you with that conversation. All right, tournament scores. One problem that we see and why this conversation has come up is that sometimes too many T-scores are designated by a club and put into people's records as a member, and that can also have a negative effect on somebody's handicap in terms of how Section 10-3, which is the reduction due to exceptional tournament scores, is supposed to be properly administered. And what it does is that it creates basically a dilution of those T-scores in somebody's records. We don't want to see that. That's why we want there to be a proper amount of tournament scores to those really to those events that properly deserve it. Keep in mind that a tournament score should be a competition where there's a lot on the line. You know, there's a heightened sense of competitiveness. You know, that you're under added pressure because this is your major. That's how you should look at it, and that only your major should be the ones that have that T-score designation, not something that you play on a regular basis. All right, what is actually eligible for a tournament score? So when 10-3 is actually calculated, what it's looking for is that any tournament score that has been made within the last 12 months or is on somebody's current handicap record within the last 20. So in most cases, people play enough golf where it is in their last 12 months. But also if you don't have a lot of scores posted, it very well may be within your last 20. And then also when there are eligible tournament scores, that will be next transferred to the Section 10-3 calculation, which we'll talk about here in a little bit later, in order to see if you are eligible for a reduction, and you would see that R on your handicap index, which we will discuss later. All right, let's dive into Section 8 here, the Handicap Committee, which is very important in making sure that the integrity of the system within your own club is maintained. So the Handicap Committee chairperson, the position of the chairperson, who must be a member of the club, requires a substantial amount of time and basic knowledge of the handicap system. What I'm going to say is that this job is not for everybody. It is a volunteer opportunity for some who take it on, and you couldn't say enough of how much respect we have for these people. The handicap chairperson sometimes is not the easiest job on earth. There does create complications sometimes, and there's a lot of tedious work with it. And we send our appreciation every day from us to you guys because it is a lot of work, and we know that in order to maintain its system properly to your club members, a lot is needed. So we send our thanks out every time. We mentioned that in our preseason packet because there's so much involved with this system. Also, the more information the handicap chairperson gives the members, the more cooperation the handicap chairperson is likely to receive. So to that very point, if there's one thing I can take away from this whole webinar, and there's a lot of information here, is that us, the WSGA, ask you to communicate with your members as much as possible. The more communication, the more information you get out to your members, the less confusion, the less chance for somebody to be be mad or frustrated with a situation, only because if they don't have the knowledge base to understand a certain situation when it comes up and for you to explain it to them, then the less likely there is for there to be a conflict. We don't want to see conflict. We want people to be informed. We do our best here at the WSGA, but that also comes from us, you guys, the handicap chair and its committee. So I just ask, communicate, communicate, communicate. You can't do it enough. whether through a newsletter, seminars, whatever it may be. Please do it as much as you can with your club members. All right, a handicap committee is a committee of a golf club that ensures compliance with the USGA Handicap System, including peer review. The majority of the handicap committee members must be a member of the club. So to that point, while employees or staff members of a facility are great to have on your committee, they're an essential part of what you guys do out there, and they're there to help you along the way. The handicap chair must be a member, and the committee must be made up of more of peers than of staff member. So just keep that point. We want you guys to have great handicap committees and have great conversations, but also keep in mind that we need you as peer members of that club to dominate that committee and have a majority there versus the staff member. I think having a staff member along for the ride is great because they see a lot of things and can provide some wonderful input, but ultimately the members of the club should be they're the ones driving that conversation and making sure that the right decisions are made. All right. Duties and responsibilities of the committee. So this would include verifying all acceptable scores are reported for handicap purposes, and that recorded scores are available for peer review. So once again, just making sure that the tools are out there, your members are aware of where they can do peer review, and also making sure that when people play golf and within your club, they're actually putting in the right scores and making sure that the scores are there all together. Also, examining results of competitions, making sure that everybody who competed in that your last event is also in the system, but also more importantly, if somebody shoots an extremely low net score within your competition, as a committee, that should send off a red flag, because either that person just had the round of their life, and if it is, then that may be the case, but it also may be a case of somebody shooting lower than what their handicap index is actually indicating. So it may be more of a conversation or an investigation into an individual about what may actually be going on here, which may lead to greater conversations. Should this person be modified? So just keep in mind that you need to keep on taps with these things. That's the point of the committee, to make sure that the right decisions are made for each individual member. All right, also making sure that player records are maintained. This is extremely important for us, as that when in GIN system, you have the ability to, addresses, email addresses, and that contact information. Not only is it good for you guys to maintain good records, but that information is extremely important to us at the WSGA. Keep in mind that we are a member-owned association, and that we provide a lot of benefits to our members, and we want to make sure that every member has every opportunity to see those benefits and take advantage of them. And we can't communicate with our members unless those records are as updated as possible. So we look to you as the committee and handicap chair to give us the best possible information so that we can communicate with our members as well, as best as possible. And then lastly, like again, I'll harp on this all webinar, please communicate with your members as much as possible. There's a lot of information here, and we just want to make sure that they're as in tune with what's going on there as you guys work so hard to maintain the handicap system. All right, handicap revisions. So back in 2012, the USGA adopted the national revision schedule. Before then, every golf association had the ability to set their own schedule. It was a good decision regardless of the weather or types. So handicaps, as you know, are revised on the 1st and 15th of every month, regardless of inactive season, like us right this moment. Even though our handicap season is just about to begin on March 1st, we're still inactive. As you can imagine, the snow outside where we're standing at our office right now, you're not going to see a whole lot of play. And so that's the reason for our inactive season. So keep in mind that the reason that scores keep revising even during an inactive season is that if you go play in California or Arizona right now, which is pretty common for our members, that those scores must be posted to GIN immediately, because then your handicap index will be automatically revised when appropriate. So that never ends. There's always equal opportunity to go play golf when we're traveling. So please make sure that you're posting appropriately in those spots so that your handicap revises correctly. Any non-member club of an authorized golf association must observe its active season. So basically what this means is that if somebody is not a member club of the WSGA, but in some regard is issuing an official handicap index, they still must follow these rules. And then also lastly, a handicap revised on a more frequent schedule, most commonly known as a trend, as some of you have seen in the system, is always designated with an L, which means local. It is not an official handicap index, it's simply a trend. And so that information is what you're trending to be at the next revision. And that if you're going to utilize that within your own competitions, that it must remain local to your own home club. It is not transferable to anywhere else. All right, 8.4, penalty scores, handicap index adjustments, and withdrawals. So this is probably the hot topic for any committee. It's the last thing any committee wants to do, but it is probably the most essential element of any club. So if a player fails to post an acceptable score, so they posted it incorrectly, or have in most cases failed to post altogether, and the committee knows that that person did play that day, then it is the responsibility of the chair and the committee to do a couple of things. One, depending on how much information that they have the ability, one, if they know the score, go into the system without notifying the player and simply post that score for them. They knew it was a 73, they knew they played this tee, they knew he played on this day, but it's nowhere to be found in the system. The committee has the ability to go in there and post that score for them. The committee also has the discretionary to do a penalty score. So if you lack knowledge about what the information of that player was and when they played and what the score was, maybe you're not able to post that score for them, but maybe the committee decides that instead we're going to post a penalty score for them. So what you would do is you would post a score that would be designated as a P, and then that would be equal to their lowest or highest handicap differential in the player's scoring record. That would need to be determined by the committee, what would be appropriate, whether low to the highest, to the lower or higher side. Obviously, that would depend on the ability and where you kind of see their record going, so that where that would be most appropriate, and we can help you along the way there. But keep in mind that you have always the ability to do these two things, either post for them or a penalty score, or both at the same time. There are some clubs there that actually take full resource of this because they're keeping tabs on people, making sure that they're posting their scores. And so just keep in mind, this is definitely in your arsenal of something to use. And we want to make sure that if you guys set standard time frames to your club members that a score should be posted in. Now, the book simply says within a reasonable time frame. So as a committee, you need to determine what that is. For me, I would say 72 hours is acceptable. If you're getting beyond 72 hours, I think then you're kind of getting the outer reaches of like, why hasn't it been posted? Obviously, we want to encourage everybody to post as soon as possible. Whether that means as soon as they walk off the golf course, they should be walking to that handicap computer or on their gym mobile app, and they should post it. There's no reason for them not to. So just keep in mind that there should be leeway in terms of when somebody can post a score, and if they don't post at all, then the committee should step in and take action. All right. Also, the handicap committee can adjust or withdraw a handicap member's handicap index. So keep in mind, this is a club decision. It's not an association decision. We are here to help you with that. And there's some changes to the handicap system, which I'll get to at the end of this webinar, that kind of addresses that. But ultimately, it's you, the club, the committee, that needs to determine if an adjustment or withdrawal is needed for a member. A handicap index must be changed only as warranted by the handicap system. Obviously, a committee can't just say, yeah, we're just going to change them. There needs to be evidence to why somebody needs to be adjusted. And that's why we're here to help you along in that conversation. And then also the handicap committee has a responsibility of making certain that each player has a handicap index reflecting their potential ability. So like we talked about, if you're seeing somebody shoot extremely low net scores and it doesn't add up, then you as a committee need to make sure that that index is reflecting their potential ability, and that's where an adjustment may become necessary to either lower or raise their handicap index effectively. All right, let's dive into a little bit of the handicap formula. So for a handicap index to be calculated, that person will post their score, and then you must now actually determine a handicap differential. And that's taking the adjusted gross score and then matching it up against the course rating and slope of the tees they have played that day to give us this differential number. So here's the formula. Handicap differential is equal to an adjusted gross score. So that's basically utilizing equitable stroke control, which we'll talk about later, but that's the main primary ingredient used into an adjusted gross score, minus the rating of the tees they played, then multiplying that number by 113 and then dividing by the slopes of the tees they played that day. So here's an example. Player shot an adjusted gross score of 95. They played a set of tees that had a rating of 71.5, so that is subtracted to 23.5. We then take that number and multiply by 113, which is standard slope in course rating. That gives us this big number of 2655.5. And then we divide by the slope of the tees they're playing, which in this case is 125, which gives us a number of 21.24. That number then is rounded to the nearest tenth, giving them a handicap differential for that round of 21.2. All right, so a lower score may not always produce a lower differential. It all has to do with what is the course rating and slope of the tees they played, and here's some examples of that. So we already went through this example before, so we had the 21.2 based on the score of 95. Now here's an example of somebody who shot a higher score of 97, but as you can see, their rating went up 2.3 strokes to 73.8. Also, the slope went up substantially from 125 to 140. And as a result of that, even though that person shot a higher score, their differential actually went down to 18.7. That's because they're playing a substantially harder golf course. And so even though they shot a couple strokes higher, the differential even went down. As on the opposite, somebody shoots a 90, well below that, but also keep in mind that look at the rating, it's at 66.1. This is a much, much easier golf course. And also the slope is only 105. So in this case, the differential actually ends up much higher at 25.7. So in this case, what is the lowest differential? The lowest differential actually is tied to the highest overall score in their record of these three. All right, bonus for excellence. So what is used here is after you take all those differentials, say your last 20, and then you do an average of the most recent 10. At the very end of that calculation, there is a multiplication by 0.96, which is called bonus for excellence. And the point behind this is that it is trying to provide an incentive for players to improve their golf games. So as you can imagine, if you are a lower handicapper, that 0.96 is not going to have much of an effect on your handicap index. Now, if you're a higher handicapper, that 0.96 could be a whole stroke off your handicap index. It could make it. So what the system is trying to do is that provide you an incentive to get your index lower and lower as much as possible. And while people will refute this, the reality is that a person with a lower handicap playing in a net event actually has a better chance of placing higher or winning in a handicap event versus a higher handicapper, because this bonus of excellence is going to have a greater effect on the higher handicapper than on the lower handicapper. You know, for the longest time, everybody says the higher handicap always has an advantage. Well, the reality is the lower does, because they're not being affected by the system as much as the higher handicapper. All right. So how is our calculations totaled up? Many of you have probably seen this chart in the book. So we all know that the average of the 10 best differentials over the last 20 is the standard, and then multiplied by 0.96. But for those individuals who are starting out getting a handicap index for the first time, it is a progression of how many differentials are used to determine your handicap index. So we know that it takes at least 5 18-hole scores to begin. In that case, if you had 5, you would then take the lowest one differential, and that would be then multiplied by 0.96, and that is your handicap index. It will then progressively get larger. So when you're just starting, it's only taking 20% of your differentials to all the way at the end, you're taking 50% of your differentials to determine your handicap index. So what usually happens is that somebody's handicap index will tend to be lower than it normally should be at the beginning, and then their index will typically get a little bit higher with time when they get all the way out to 10 out of 20. Only because it's taking a greater average of the bunch versus that just single differential at the very beginning. So here's an example. Bob is a new member and provides the club with 7 scores. So in this case, you can see that the number of scores is 7. We're only going to take the lowest 2 differentials, which is in this case is a 9.0 and 11.0. What should his handicap index be? So what we do is we take an average of those 2 lowest differentials, which we know is 10.0, and then multiply by 0.96 for that bonus of excellence, which would lead his handicap index to be 9.6. So that's how we calculate a handicap index. All right. Reduction of handicap index based on exceptional tournament scores, the famous 10-3, or more importantly, the dreaded R. It's amazing how many calls we get. It's not a fun topic to talk to people about because they've been reduced. Obviously, common names we usually hear is restricted. Please help our members understand that the R is not restricted. I have no idea where that name came from. It is reduced, and we ask that you help our members understand that that word means reduce or reduction. It has nothing to do with restricted. So what the system is looking for is, as we talked about, we want to make sure there's some scrutiny behind what is a T-score. We want those major championships, those major tournaments within your clubs, which means there should be added pressure, which should mean that most likely you're going to shoot a higher score during those events than a lower score because of the added pressure and what's going on within that event. So the system in 10-3 is looking for your 2 or more, if you have 2 or more eligible tournament scores. So we talked about within your last 20 or within the last 12 months. And if there are at least 2 eligible tournament scores within your record, what the system will then do is determine, are those 2 lowest T-score differentials at least 3.0 or more strokes lower than your normal handicap index of section 2-2, which we just did on the previous slide. So we're looking to see if they are the lowest 2 differentials are at least 3 strokes better than your normal handicap index. If that is the case, then the system kind of moves on in its progression. So here's an example. I highly advise you to look through pages 80 through 85 of your manual. It kind of goes through the whole calculation. So on this example, on September 1st, Sandy's calculated 10-2 value was 24.2. And she had 2 exceptional tournament scores that averaged out at 18.2. So based on that example, we know that the difference between it is more than 3.0. In this case, it's actually 6.0. So they're substantially under her normal handicap index. So based on that, we are going to take this into the next piece of the formula. So based on the information, what is their new handicap index? So what we need to do is first determine what was the difference between the average of the lowest two differentials, which we know is 6.0, and then subtract that from, you know, for what those averages were from the normal handicap index, which was 6. So we have that, and that will be used down the left-hand side of this table in the book. Then you must also determine how many eligible T-scores did they have available within their last 12 months or their last 20 scores. In this example, they had 7. So simply we do is we go to the table and then we match it up. So we would go to 5 to 9 because they had 7 eligible T-scores. And then we would go to 6.0 because that was the average of the two lowest T-score differentials, the differences from their handicap index. And then we would match it up the middle, which it gives us 1.9. This is the amount of strokes that needs to be reduced from their normal 10-2 handicap index. So she had a 24.2, we would subtract the 1.9, and now her new handicap index for that revision is 22.3 with an R. So that is how it is calculated. Keep in mind that the 10-3 is an automatic function of the system. So when people get upset, they feel like the committee or us, the WSGA, has done this to them. And the reality is that we don't do anything with this. This is done by the system itself. It is looking for this on a consistent basis. So here let's move ahead one more revision. So we were September 1st, now we're September 15th. Her handicap index has now gone to 26.2. So in that time, her index dropped. She went up 2 whole strokes, which is quite a bit, which means she's not playing very good right at the moment. And so now she has still those 2 exceptional tournament score differentials at 18.2. So in that revision time, she's not played a single tournament event within that time frame. So she still has 7 total eligible scores available. So now we need to determine what is her revision at this time, this go around. So if you take the 26.2 and we subtract now 18.2, that difference, which was 6.0 last time, now has become 8.0. As you can probably imagine, what's going to happen here is that her reduction is going to substantially increase. And the reason behind that is it's an inverse relationship here. So if you set the potential of shooting some really good T-score in the system and you are playing worse and you're going in the opposite direction, the system knows that you have the potential to play really good golf. So what it's going to do is going to reduce you even further to catch up with that potential. That's what's happening here. Versus if you play better and you start playing closer to that potential, your reduction is either going to get smaller, or in some cases, or a lot of cases, your R will actually go away altogether. So based on this example, what are we going to see here? So we talked about she's playing, going higher in her index. So in this case, most likely her reduction is going to increase. So let's match it up. So she's still in the 5 to 9 because she only had 7 eligible T-scores. And now the average is 8.0. We match it up. Now we are going to reduce her normal 10-2 by 5.5 strokes. We're now getting up there. So now what is her new handicap index? Well, we take the 26.2, we subtract the 5.5. Now she's a 20.7 R. So previously she was a 22.3 R, and now she's playing even worse, and her index has come down further. So just keep in mind that the further you play away, the larger that reduction is going to get. The closer you play to it, it's going to be altogether or a very small reduction. We see R's most commonly at the very beginning of the season, and it makes a lot of sense. We are all rusty from playing golf. Most of us don't get an opportunity to play during the winter because either we don't want to because it's ugly outside, and we just don't have the opportunity to because other things are happening. So we got to shake that rust off. So people tend to play a little bit worse in those beginning months, March, April. And so what happens is those R's start showing up because they had eligible tournament scores where they played really well the year prior, but their index is creeping upward. And so that R may kick in. Also, a fun fact is that the USGA told us that, you know, there's about 2 million people in the GIN system, or a little bit more, and that on any given moment, there usually is about 5,000 to 5,500 people that have an R. You may think that there's a lot more people out there that have Rs, but the reality is it's a very small percentage. So an R is a very unusual circumstance, but when they do come up, people are frustrated, and because they don't understand what exactly is happening. So once again, it ties into that communication piece. If you can keep your members more give them more information about what's happening here, I would imagine that they would understand the situation a little bit more. So based on this chart, you can see that from revision to revision, R's can vary greatly, because we just in those two examples see how much it varied just based on how somebody's playing. So as you can see here, and you know, the R can go down, and then it can increase, and then it can go down again. So there's a lot of movement, and then all the way to the point where the R completely fell off, as you can see at the last part of this chart. You know, the R could either fall off because they're playing better and they're getting closer to that potential, or those tournament scores fall off the record completely because they've gone outside of the 20 or the last 12 months. There's a lot of things in play here when 10-3 is calculated. Just keep in mind that these things can go on quite a roller coaster ride before they naturally correct themselves. So just keep in mind that, you know, there's a lot of fluctuation, and that it's recalculating at each revision. And then lastly, you, the handicap committee, must review these reductions. It's important that you see them and understand them, because as a committee, you may find that you feel like this is inappropriate. These are not calculating the true potential of this golfer. Maybe something happened. Maybe somebody had an injury, and those are things that we need to be analyzing. So the committee has every right to increase, reduce, or override a 10-3 reduction altogether. And we would love to have those conversations with you as you're trying to determine those items, because sometimes the system is not accurately determining that potential, and so that the committee may need to step in to make the right adjustment. So if the committee determines that the 10-3 over the reduction should be removed altogether, there is a form that we provide to you, and we did in our preseason packet, to give you the opportunity to override the 10-3 altogether. And so on this form, you would fill out the golfer's name, their GIN number, and then we need a very thorough explanation to why you guys reached that decision. And then we need signatures below. Also keep in mind that based on the new handicap system, us, the WSGA, has every right to deny that request. That's why we would prefer to talk to you through the situation and understand why you've made that decision, because it needs to be sound. Also keep in mind that if a 10-3 is override and we don't deny that request, then that 10-3 override is permanent on somebody's record. So when I say permanent, it means that there is no way for the system to put a 10-3 R on somebody's record at any time going forward. So it is also the responsibility of the club to make sure that while you had good intentions of removing at that moment, it's also the committee's responsibility to make sure that it is removed at the appropriate time as well. So it's not just a one and done, it sticks with them forever. So that's why 10-3 overrides should be a case that's used on very infrequently, and there should be good reasonings for utilizing that. Honestly, I would adjust somebody before utilizing the 10-3 override. That's just personal opinion. I think it's just good practice and best practices going forward. And that is section 3 of the player. All right, using a handicap index. A player is responsible for knowing the handicap index issued to the player. At the most recent revision, a player must convert that handicap index to a whole handicap number course handicap. So, you know, we give out an e-revision after every revision. It gives them an update. They can also see their handicap index updated on their GIM mobile app, at the club's computer. There's a lot of places for them to know that, but it's also a responsibility of the player to know what it is at each revision, so that their course handicap is calculated correctly when they play golf that day. So how do we get a course handicap? A course handicap is rounded to the nearest whole number, handicap strokes in relation to the course rating. of the tees being played. So in this example, a player has a 15.2 handicap index, and they're playing a set of tees that has a slope rating of 125. Many of you have seen these course handicap revision charts at your golf club. We provide these after we re-rate any golf course. So they're updated, so they have the most updated information. So in this case, you would go down to the table, 15.2 falls right there, and their course handicap for the day would be 17. Also, a course handicap is calculated by taking the handicap index, multiplied by the slope, and then dividing by 113. It's the quick way to find out a course handicap if you wanted to manually calculate it out as well. Also with that, a good thing to know is what your target score is. So there's a misconception out there that if your par is 72, that shooting your handicap means net 72. And the reality is, in almost every case, that is incorrect. It could be, but what the reality is that shooting your handicap means shooting net course rating. And so if your rating is 72, then you're absolutely correct. You shot your handicap if it matches up with par. But a lot of times ratings don't match up to par. And par has no effect on course in handicapping at all. It has a very little effect. As you're going to see here, we haven't even brought up par because it's not a big part of our handicaps system. So what you want to know is what is truly your target score, and that is shooting your handicap. So anybody can do this. So let's say the course rating you're playing that day is 70.1. Then you tack on the course handicap for your day, and that's 17. So your target score is 87. So if you shoot 87 that day based on this set of tees, and that was your handicap index, then you have shot your handicap, that 87. But also keep in mind that target score is not intended to be shot all the time. It's actually only intended to be shot 20 to 25% because, as we talked about, this is not about averages, this is about your potential. So the system is not designed for you to shoot it all the time. What really you should be shooting on an average is 2 to 4 strokes higher than that target score, as you can see outlined here, which would be an 89 to 91. So here's another example. Same handicap, same person, but the slope they're playing that day is 147, so they're playing a much harder golf course. So we go to the table. Now they get a course handicap of 20. So we find here that the rating they're playing, let's say it went from 71.1 to 72.8. So we add those 20 strokes. Their target score for that day is now 93. So their average score should be 95 to 97. So it really depends on the set of tees you're playing. A good way to look at this, some people believe that they set their handicap to one specific set of tees. Well, the reality is that's not possible. You could play your whole life from one set of tees and you still have not established your handicap from that set of tees. The reason is that the course rating system is universal across the world. That system is how we measure all golf courses. So regardless of where you play, that information is transferable to another golf course and another set of tees. So once again, target score is really the true definition of playing to your handicap. It has nothing to do with par. So you're looking for net course rating. And lastly, you should be shooting your handicap, your target score, 20 to 25% of the time, because it is a measure of potential and not your average. Can't harp on that enough. And a similar example again. All right. How else should I shoot? So once again, just kind of re-emphasizing this, you should only shoot your player handicap about 25% of the time. They'll shoot 3 strokes below their handicap once every 20 scores. So even that's we're talking about 15% of the time. So like I said, it's supposed to be a small percentage of shooting your handicap. Everybody's like, oh, I can't shoot my handicap. Well, you're not supposed to shoot it all the time. It's only supposed to be on a rare occasion. And so because of that, within their last 20 scores, their average score should be about 3 shots higher than their target score or their handicap. People have a hard time getting their mind around this. That's why we ask you guys to help us, that it's about potential and not about average. They should be shooting higher than a handicap on average. All right. Maximum handicap index. So the maximum for men is 36.4. For women is 40.4. There's some big changes coming to this in the World Handicapping System. Also, if you go above that, the system will actually record it, but it will mark you as an L. Once again, L is for local. So if you do want to use that local handicap, you may, if the club will allow you, and you can only use it at your home club. It is not transferable. So if you have a handicap index, let's say of 44, and you want to go play at another club in their event, that club will then take you down to, it would say if you're a woman, they would take you down to a 40.4, and that's what you would play from. It is not a transferable item. It is only meant to be used at your own local club. Some of you probably have seen some of the information from the USGA website on the World Handicapping System. These numbers are actually going to go up to 54.0 for men and women. So they're trying to include more people to try to get away from the L. So they're making a huge effort to be more inclusive. And so that's one change I do know that's coming down the pipeline. All right. Section 3-5. Can't harp on this one enough. I love this section. I love it because it includes more people to play golf with each other. So this is when people play from different sets of tees and they want to play in that same competition, have a net match. Keep in mind that Section 3-5 only works for net competitions. It does not work for gross competitions. And also it doesn't work if you are having like a KP and people are playing from different tees. Because there's no way to calculate that in. You would have to either have a separate pot for each tee or have everybody play from that same tee. All right, how do we do this? So Section 3-5 is pretty simple computation. Basically, it's looking at the differences between course ratings, has nothing to do with slope. And that rating difference must be a difference of 0.5 or higher for this to kick in, for there to be an adjustment. Any tee can be played. That player does not have an established handicap once again, nobody has a handicap from a particular set of tees. So any tee can be used and their handicap index can transfer to anywhere on there. So just keep in mind that nobody has a handicap from a particular set. I've heard from a particular set of tees. I've heard that conversation way too many times. Your handicap index is universal. It's used across any golf course or any set of tees. And then slope rating alone doesn't count for the differences in the expected scoring when players are competing from different tees. Like we said, slope doesn't have anything to do with this. This has to do with the rating between the tees. We're looking for straight stroke differences between those two tees in difficulty. So, are you getting enough strokes? So you can see here in the picture, we have two individuals playing from two different tee boxes. They want to have a match, but clearly this guy wants to stick to the gold tees because that's where he's comfortable. But this guy wants to play from the white tees. And he's like, well, this doesn't seem fair. Well, you're right. It isn't fair. There needs to be an additional calculation. That's where Section 3-5 kicks in. Somehow we have to be able to equalize tees golf courses. So keep in mind that the white tees and the gold tees are two different golf courses. Yeah, you may be playing at the same place, but they are truly two different golf courses because they're different yardages. And you're going to find that your ball is going to end up in different situations than the person that's in front of you. So how do we equalize that? So we have these two individuals, Warren and Gary. They each have the same handicap index of 15.2. Warren's playing from the white tees. That's got a 72.8, 147 rating and slope, and his course handicap for the day is 20. Gary's playing from the gold tees, and his course rating, as you can see, is 71.3, 125, which equalizes his course handicap at 17. So right from the beginning, they have different course handicaps, even though they have the same handicap index because they're playing from two different golf courses. You got to keep that in mind. So what do we need to do to actually equalize this match? Because the match isn't equalized alone. All you have is a course handicap based on the tee. There's nothing that's been equated for what's the differences between the two tees itself. So in this example, we have to look at target score. And so you can see here the target score for Warren is 93 and the target score for Gary is 87. There's a 6-stroke difference. But there needs to be an additional calculation in there. So what do we need to do here? So in this case, we need to get the net scores to equalize out, because we're talking about equalizing the field to a level net competition. Remember, it can't happen on a gross side. So in this case, you have two options. Warren, who was a course handicap of 20, as we can see here, I went too fast here. So if you look at the 72.8 and then subtract it from the 70.1, that gives you a total of 2.7. You then round to the nearest whole number. That is 3 whole strokes that those two tees are carrying a difference of. So in this case, Warren, who's playing the harder set of tees, is going to get 3 additional strokes. So he's going to go from a 20 to 23. And so based on the net scores here, you can see that based on target scores, I'm sorry, you can get an equalized field of a net score 70 on each side. Or you have the ability to do this on the opposite end, where Gary can actually remove 3 strokes from his course handicap because he's playing an easier golf course, the shorter tees. And so he would go from a 17 to a 14, and Warren would remain a 20, and they each would end up with the same net score based on that target score. So keep this in mind. I want people to play from the tees that they're comfortable with, because that will ultimately lead to more entries to your event. But also, the key point here is that you want to affect the least amount of people with section 3-5, because it leads to more conversation, it leads to bigger discussions, and you want to affect the least amount because you want those conversations to be shorter. And see, most people only understand by, well, that's my course handicap and that's what I'm supposed to be. So if there is an adjustment, you want to make sure that you have as few conversations with those individuals as possible. The nice thing about tournament management, USGA Tournament Management, the Golf Genius software, that it does 3-5 for you. And there's a great handicap analysis part in that tournament software that will show you exactly why somebody ended up at that handicap index and that course handicap, even with 3-5 calculated in there. So I can't emphasize enough that please promote 3-5 in your events. It's a great tool. Also keep in mind that if 2 people or more are playing from different tees, 3-5 must be implemented. It is required. You cannot separate the 2 out. And if you do separate them, you do not make an adjustment 3-5, and then those competitions have to remain separate from one tee from another. All right, moving on to section 4, adjusting hole scores. All right, so 4-1 is addressing unfinished holes and conceded strokes. So this is a, let's say you had a match and somebody said, yep, just pick it up, you're good. Or you start a hole and you say, you know what, I'm just done because weather's coming in, but you already started the hole. What do I do? So in the example here, what you're trying to figure out is most likely score. So if you look at the individual here on the match, on the green here, you can see that he's looking over and he probably said, yeah, pick it up, I concede the hole. So let's say he's lying 4. You now need to determine what is the most likely score this individual will make. Well, looking, he's got about a 15-footer. I would say that he's most likely going to make a 2-putt, and that would end up with a 6. So you just need to use your best determination. So like I said, it's using the player's best judgment to determine what is the appropriate amount of strokes that should be posted for that hole. So in that case, you would use an X on that hole and then post the amount of strokes for that hole. There is no limit to the amount of unfinished holes a player may have in a round, provided that failure to finish is not for purpose of handicap manipulation. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. As long as somebody's doing it in the right manner, you can utilize this system as much as possible for handicap purposes. All right, section 4-2, holes not played or not played under the rules of golf. So if you tee off and then decide, oh, that wasn't really good, I'm gonna hit a mulligan. Technically, you have not played that hole under the rules of golf. And so in this situation, what you would do is that you would then take par plus any strokes you received on a hole and mark it as an X. In this case, if it was a par 4 and you got 1 stroke on that hole, you would simply mark X5. So in that case, so anytime you don't play within the rules of golf, you need to treat the hole differently versus what you did within the previous situation where you teed off and at some point you picked up because of certain circumstance. You would then determine what is the most reasonable amount of strokes you would have made for that given hole. So just keep in mind, there's a difference between starting a hole and then not finishing versus not playing a hole under the rules of golf altogether. Section 4-3, equitable stroke control. Many of us have heard about this, and what this is trying to do is remove outliers from the handicap system. We all have bad days, we all have bad holes. And so what the system is trying to do is eliminate those monster holes, because we're looking for potential and averages. So we don't want those really big numbers of basically skewing your data of what your true potential is. And that's why ESC was implemented. So ESC is set to the maximum number of strokes you can play based on your course handicap. So this all has to do with what your course handicap is for the day of the tee and the golf course you're playing. So many of us have seen this table. One thing that most people get confused on is they think it's course handicap. They believe it's handicap index, when in reality it's course handicap. So if I'm a 9.0 course handicap, it doesn't necessarily mean that the maximum number I can take on any hole is a double bogey. If you're playing a golf course that has a very high slope, your course handicap may end up being 10. So in that case, the highest number you can take is a 7. So people just need to be aware that it's calculating based on course handicap and not your handicap index. This is also a change that's coming in the World Handicapping System. They're going to make this, I believe, net double bogey is going to be across the board for any golfer. So that will be another welcome change. Once again, trying to keep things simplified than going off on this table. So more information to come on that. I just know that it has been out there in the public now. Also, tournament scores need to utilize ESC as well when posting. For anybody who is still trying to establish a handicap index and just starts, they should use the maximum number, which in this case would be a 10. So that's just a general rule of thumb. Use a 10 if you're still establishing a handicap index and you don't have one yet. All right, section 5, acceptability of scores. So what do you need to post when playing golf? So if you play at least 7 holes under the rules of golf, you need to post a 9-hole score. And if you play at least 13 holes of golf under the rules of golf, you need to post an 18-hole score. So a great example is I play 14 holes, a thunderstorm rolls in, I quit, I go to the clubhouse, and I'm done for the day. In that example, you would need to post an 18-hole score, and that the remaining 4 holes would then be under section 4-2, which we talked about, where you didn't play them, and you simply take par plus any handicap strokes you get, and then use that toward your total and post that as your round for the day. The same rule would apply to 9 holes. So let's say you play 12 holes, thunderstorm rolls in, you quit for the day. In that case, you would only post a 9-hole score. You would holes 10 through 12 would be just negated, and you would just post that first 9-hole scores to your record. All right, what's acceptable for score posting? Obviously, any score played on a golf course with a USGA rating and slope made during an active season. Definitely not here today. But if you go down south, let's say you're in Hawaii, then you should go and post all the time because those honor year-round score posting seasons. Also, scores that are in either match or stroke play. So if you do a match play, those scores should be posted. Also, if you're doing a team competition, let's say a best ball, those need to be posted. So let's say you're doing a best ball and you pick up because your partner is doing really well on the hole, then you need to utilize section 4-1 to determine what you would have scored on that hole and post that for your score posting on the day for the handicapping purposes. So Don't think that just playing normal golf, stroke play golf, is the only way to post a score. It should be utilized in match play and in team and competitions where appropriate. Obviously, if you're doing a scramble, you're not utilizing your own ball, so in those cases, you wouldn't post those scores. Obviously, any time you play golf under the rules of golf should be posted. And then lastly, if you're disqualified from a competition, you should still post that score. So let's say you sign an incorrect scorecard, but you play the round of golf, those scores should still go into the handicap system. It shouldn't preclude it. All right, what is not acceptable for score posting? When you obviously play less than 7 holes, when made on a golf course in an area which an inactive season established, so that would be here if you play golf today in the snow, you would not be able to post that for handicap purposes. When you're playing in a competition where the maximum number of clubs is less than 14. So if you're playing a competition and you're only allowed 6 clubs, that is not eligible to be posted for a score. You have to be able to utilize all 14 clubs if the golfer chooses to be acceptable for score posting. When scores are made on a golf course with no USGA course rating or slope, obviously that would make a lot of sense, but also there's a caveat to that, which we'll get to, where let's say you're a woman and you wanted to play a longer set of tees and there's no rating for that. There is a section in the book that allow you to actually create a temporary rating for that one situation for you to be able to post a score, and we'll get to that here in a second. Also, some newer ones, when somebody uses a non-conforming club, ball, or tee, obviously that's kind of outside the rules of golf, then those scores are unacceptable. New one, when players play alone, obviously this ties into peer review. We want to make sure that people know what you're playing, how you're playing, so that when it gets posted, there's somebody can actually determine if that score is correct. Also, if somebody ignores one or more rules of golf and fails to post an adjusted score under that section, it is unacceptable. So let's say that you receive a penalty and you don't even post it to your record, you don't even record it on your scorecard. That round is no longer acceptable for score posting because you're falling outside of that the rules of golf. Another one with a change to the anchoring. If somebody anchors their club and doesn't record the penalty, then that is unacceptable for score posting. So there's a couple of situations here where you need to be aware of that. You got to be following the rules of golf for it to be a postable round. All right, posting scores. As you many know, we've got plenty of machines at every one of our facilities. We provide a handicap computer and we'll still continue to do that. But there's so many other ways now, you know, GIN mobile app, our website, gin.com, so many ways to get your scores in there. So it shouldn't preclude anybody from getting a score posted as fast as possible. Also, it really leads into better peer review when you can get your scores posted as quickly as possible, for then somebody can review them when it's fresh on their mind. All right, when posting a score, this is the information that needs to be returned for proper peer review. Obviously, the name or the identification number, which would be a GIN number, the date played, course name, the rating and slope of the tee they played, what was their adjusted gross score, and what was the score type, whether it was home, away, or a tournament score. Also keep in mind that for type 1 and 2 golf clubs, the course name is a recommendation. For type 3 clubs, it is mandatory because those are internet-based clubs and makes peer review a little bit harder. So that information is required. Course name is definitely required for type 3 clubs. All right, posting scores. A golf club may determine that scores to be returned as 18-hole scores or as hole-by-hole, but is not required to be hole-by-hole. Also, when scores are posted, it does not have to be accompanied with a scorecard. That is not required. All right. Committee posting a score. The committee is authorized and encouraged to post scores for all competitors. So if you're having a tournament and let's say it is a T-score, not only do you need to notify the players beforehand that it is going to be a tournament score, I would also advise you to, and strongly encourage you to also notify them that you will be posting those scores for them. It removes duplicates from the situation. Also, the committee in one fell swoop using tournament software can also send those scores to Jen, and it eliminates the chance that somebody forgets to post altogether. But just keep in mind, inform, that goes right into that communication piece. Also, it's a great way for to be utilized in informal events or leagues as well. Just make sure you keep those people aware of that. We highly encourage committees to do posting because in most cases they are more reliable than the individual golfer making sure their scores are posted. And once again, please notify in advance. We want to avoid those duplicate postings, so we have to less corrections after the fact. Okay, here's what we're talking about: posting a score from unrated set of tees and on a rated golf course. So this is 5.2G of your book. And what it is it's a table of men's and women on being able to create a temporary rating for you to post into the handicap system for a rating that just didn't make sense at the time. The club didn't request a rating for those set of tees, but now you can create a temporary situation. This definitely is not a substitute for the formal rating and slope process. So if this is a set of tees that more people are playing, then we would recommend that the club make a recommendation to us, the WSGA, to get an official rating and slope for those set of tees. If the committee in charge of the competition has used a combination of tees, a lot of times we see that they want to use a little bit of blue and white, and there's no rating for that. 5.2G is a great way to create a temporary rating for your competition that day. So if you want to mix up the golf course, feel free to, but just utilize the 5.2G and utilize the closest yardage of a set of tees that has been rated to what the total yardage is of the ones that you mixed up, and create that temporary rating. So this individual wants to utilize Tee It Forward, wants to play a set of tees that are farther up that doesn't have a men's rating on it. So the closest rating that is near there to that set of tees is 71.0 and our slope rating 117. These 4 tees are 800 yards shorter. So what he would do is go into the book and finds out on the table that between 781 and 802, he needs to subtract 3.6 strokes from the rating and 9 strokes slope points from the middle tee. So what will ultimately give him a new rating for this set of tees, a temporary rating of 67.4 and a temporary slope rating of 108. And he would utilize that manually into the handicap system in Gen and post that for that day. Once again, this is only for a temporary situation. And if more people are playing these tees, please ask us to give you an official rating for those tees. All right, section 7. Acceptability of scores when playing preferred lies. So scores made during local rules when preferred lies or winter rules are in effect must be posted for handicap purposes, unless the committee determines that the conditions are so poor that it should not be posted. So here's my thoughts on the day. I believe we see too many times when winter rules are put into play when they shouldn't be. A lot of times it's getting later in the year, let's say it's October, and just because it's the time of year of October, golf courses said, well, it's fall, so we need winter rules. Well, take last year. October was extremely warm in the state, and we had a lot of great golf out there, and the golf courses were in fantastic shape. And yet golf courses I've seen were putting winter rules in play. That's not a good reason to put winter rules. It takes away from the game of golf and how it's supposed to be played, and as we'll get here, it has an adverse effect on handicap index. So please, as a handicap committee, please work with your club, your facility, most importantly, your superintendent, to make sure winter rules are put in play when they're most appropriate. So if something comes through, a big storm comes in and winter rules need to be in play, put them in play. But if it dries out and we're still in the fall time, then winter rules need to be lifted until it need to be appropriately put back in play. So it just has too many adverse effects on the handicap system, and frankly, it's unfair to the golfer. because in most cases they're going to shoot better and their handicap index is going to go down lower than it probably should be. So like I said, please withdraw when conditions are warranted. Don't leave them up there simply because of the time of year. So pitfalls, obviously it conflicts with the principles of playing the ball as it lies. I think we all know that. Sometimes adopted under the guise of protecting the golf course, when in fact it doesn't have, it has the opposite effect. Because what's going to happen here is that you're in a lie, and then you're going to prop your ball up into the nicest piece of turf, which then you're going to take a divot out of, and it's going to make all that great turf turn and to get all chewed up. So it doesn't necessarily protect the golf course. Once again, it tends to lower scores, which then leads to lower handicap indexes. And then lastly, extended use of this will actually have a disadvantage to those players, especially when they're competing at golf courses where they use winter rules correctly. So it will actually create a disadvantage for that player when competing elsewhere. All right, let's dive into handicap allowances. So these are percentages you would take off a handicap index based on a form of competition. And these are done based on a lot of calculations the USGA has done to make sure that we're creating fair and equal matches, like when we're doing a best ball or a scramble or whatever it may be. So a lot of these times you're going to utilize a full course handicap and then make an adjustment based on the form of competition. A lot of times you'll see this in team competitions. So let's go through a few exercises here. All of these examples are on pages 60 through 68 of what adjustments need to be done. And we'll go through a couple that are not listed in the book, but have some general guidelines. On page 60, this is the one I would literally earmark on your book, how to properly calculate a course handicap in the right order. Sometimes course handicaps are improperly put together, so we're going to kind of make sure that they are put in the right order. First, determine the course handicap from the tees that person is playing. Then secondly, you need to apply the appropriate allowance. So let's say I am playing the white tees and my course handicap is 20. Then I'm playing in a best ball. I've got a partner here. And for the men, the allowance would be 90%. So now I'm going to go from a 20 to an 18. So once again, figure out your course handicap, then determine the allowance. So now we're down to an 18. Now, let's say it is recommended that if you're playing in a best ball, that if you have more than an 8-stroke difference from your competitor, your strokes shouldn't be brought down to that competitor within 8 strokes. A lot of people do this, but in reality, what they need to be doing is implementing an additional 10% reduction. I can't emphasize this enough. We see this so many times that teams are being reduced down to whatever that stroke limit is. Well, if you have a 5 handicapper and a 30 handicapper, and you have an 8-stroke difference, that means that 30 handicapper is going to become a 13. Let me ask a simple question: does that team have a fair chance to win the competition? The reality is no. So what should be happening is that 5 and that 30 should be reduced 10% because it's a best ball competition, and then should be reduced an additional 10% to equalize the match and equalize against the field. So that's how you should be doing, but that would happen in step 3. And then lastly, you implement 3-5. So once again, I was a 20, then I got reduced to an 18. And let's say the person I'm playing with is a 5 handicap. So we're outside that 8 strokes. So then my 18 would then become 16.2, which would then be 16. And then let's say that I am playing a set of tees that are 3 strokes easier. I play 4 tees than my competitor in the field. So then I'm going to go from a 20 to an 18 to a 16, and then 3-5 is going to be implemented, and I'm going to have 3 more taken off, so I'm going to be all the way down to a 13. So just keep in mind that you need to put in these in the proper steps 1 through 4. And like I said, I would mark page 60 in your manual so that you can see these steps in clear print and utilize that when you're calculating course handicaps. It's also nice that the USGA Tournament Management System also does this for you, so take advantage of that as well. All right, handicap allowances. So these are the general guidelines out there for what handicap analysis should be used. So in 4-ball match play, which we're talking about best ball. So in this case, match play, what you want to do is, let's say the handicaps were 5, 10, 15, and 20 amongst the group. In this case, because it's match play, they're 2 versus 2. What you want to do is that you want to lower everybody down so that the lowest handicap becomes 0, and then everybody else is effective accordingly. So in this case, you would have the player A at scratch, B would be 5, C would get 10, and then D would get 15. What's nice in USGA tournament management, you can utilize a function, a handicap function that says net off lowest, and it will take the lowest handicap person all the way down to 0, and then make the correct adjustments for the remaining players as well. So the system will do that for you. A 4-ball stroke play, which is what we were just talking about in the example before. Men should receive 90% of their course handicap. Women should be 95. Once again, we talked about in step 3, if there is a difference of 8 or more strokes, then the additional 10% should be reduced to both course handicaps of the members of that team. Some things that are not in the book, common scrambles. These are recommendations made by the USGA. So in a 4-person scramble, you should use 20, 15, 10, 5, with 20 off the lowest course handicapper of the group. And in a 2-person scramble, you should use 35 and 15%. Okay, that kind of covers the main gist of this webinar, but I want to finish up with a couple of items on things that are happening or things that you should be aware of. We have entered into a new cycle, handicap cycle, for 2018 and 2019. This was because we're all leading into the new announcement of the World Handicapping System coming in 2020. The USGA handicap manuals that you have currently with 2016-17 stamped on them are still valid, and that we are working, we already sent you electronically the preseason packet, but you also, each club, a handicap chair, will be receiving a mailer from us with their revision table, and also a sticker that can be put on your book that will say that this book is valid through 2019. So there's no changes to the manual other than what was sent to you, which we'll go into here just a bit. But there were so few changes that the manuals you have are still current. Also, in terms of licensing requirements, there still is no exam, but there will be a yearly assessment sent out. This is required of each club. Colin will be working with each of you to make sure that these assessments are done. They are there to make sure that everybody understands the handicap system and for us to analyze where people need the most help. So once that assessment does come out, please make sure that you are taking it so we can mark you off our list. In terms of the changes that were made to the handicap system for this new cycle, what I wanted to touch base on was the updated section 1111. It's fairly long, and it was sent to you as an attachment in the preseason packet. But basically what it is stemming around is that Authorized Golf Associations, us, the WSGA, has a newer updated role in handicapping. And that has to do with the changes coming in with the World Handicap System. And a couple of them I kind of want to go over are, when you guys are looking to adjust handicaps for members, that we ask that you work with us to make sure that those are properly administered. If the Authorized Golf Association, us, WSGA, has evidence that it was adjusted improperly, then we have the ability to undo those changes and basically override the situation. This is not what we want to do. So what we ask is that you just work with us to make sure that that is properly taken care of. Also, if somebody has an R, which we talked about, and you guys determine that it needs to be overridden or changed, please once again work with us to make sure that the right decision is made, because we would hate to be in a situation where we feel like something was done improperly and that we would have to make changes to your committee's decisions, because we don't want to override you. We just want to make sure that you guys are going through the process in a sound manner to reach a good decision for that golfer. Also, I know that we're going to be receiving some better tools here with the release of GIN, the new GIN platform at the end of this year. More information will be coming about that and a lot of training. We're really looking forward to it, but also we should be getting better data from us. Because also what we need to be on the lookout for is that when we see massive changes, what your committee should be looking out for anyway, that we can be a better resource to you guys in providing when we see golfers' indexes changing drastically up or down. That's usually an indication that something needs to occur or happen or some kind of modification. So we hope to provide you guys better information when we see those drastic changes to players. We already talked about tournament scores. Please call us. Let us help you advise you on what tournament scores should be part of your club and which ones should not be. And then we already talked about, and so anytime if you reach a situation where you've modified somebody, you've given penalty scores and they're still abusing the system, and you feel like that you may need to WD or withdraw somebody from the handicap system, obviously that's the last step from officially removing somebody from the system. You need to work with us to officially get that done, and we'll talk through that situation and see if it's proper to do it, and if it is, we'll make sure that you go through the proper steps in the manual to issue that WD, and then we'll get it placed in the system so that individual has that on their record. So what I just want to point out is that the Authorized Golf Association, us, WSGA, has a much larger role in handicapping now, and so we're here to advise you and help you out along the way. We're not here to be dictators about the system. We just want to be a good resource to you to make sure that your committees are making great decisions and how you're administering handicaps within your club. Also, keep in mind that PAR is actually going to have a greater influence in the new handicapping system. We were caught off guard by this one a little bit. So us, the WSGA, has always had the ability and has the authority to adjudicate PAR for any golf course. So just keep in mind that your scorecard may say PAR 72, when in reality it really should be a PAR 70, and that we are going to be keeping tabs on that, and we'll do a good job of keeping you guys informed. But when the new handicap system comes out and is calculated with PAR in there, it's going to be going off based on our judgment of PAR versus what a club might or a facility might think PAR is. So we'll be doing a good job of keeping you guys informed with that, but PAR will have a greater influence in the handicapping system going forward. All right, two more things. Also, we want to make sure that when we're entering this new season, you know, it's still wet out there. We've had snow, it's cold. And at the beginning of any season, a lot of times we don't see roll going out. So when we rate a golf course, roll is typically 20 yards a shot. And at this time of year, we just don't see that roll. And the problem is that distance is the #1 determining factor in slope and rating. So when there's no roll out there, then that rating is not correct. So what we ask is you work with your golf clubs, work with your superintendents, so that when the golf course is not in prime condition, like it usually is in March, April, May, that you do a good job of working with superintendents to make sure they move the tees up so that it equalizes out that roll. So as you can see here on a par 4, if you can move your tees up 20 yards, if there's a little bit of roll, then move them up 10 yards. That will actually help the golf course play closer to the rating so that handicaps are correctly being assessed. On a par 5, if you can move them up even further, do so, because once again, it's trying to equalize that. We want to get ratings. When people play golf, we want to make sure they match up with the rating as much as possible, but obviously there's a lot of conditions out there, especially early in the year, that kind of take away from that. So please work with your club and your facility and your superintendents as much as possible to keep your golf course as close to the ratings as possible. Also, if for any reason, especially for how bad of a winter it was last year coming into the new season, frankly, every golf course should have suspended posting at the beginning of the season, and we only had about 2 call-us that said they actually want to suspend. Remember that that is a club decision to suspend posting, so please work with your committees to see if suspending posting is actually the right decision, and we can definitely help you with that conversation. There was too many golf courses that were not suspending posting last year, and the golf courses were frankly unplayable because they were saturated. So just work with your golf club and make sure that you guys are making good decisions when it comes to handicap score posting. All right. Also, WSGA members, when you're active and when you go play down south, make sure that you're posting those scores. We already talked about this, but your revision is still continuing being updated as we go along. So also keep in mind, if you are inactive and you play a golf down, let's say in California, you still have the ability to go to that handicap computer at that club in California and post your score to your GIN number. It will go on your record, but it will have no effect on your handicap index until you reactivate your membership with the WSGA. So just keep that in mind and spread the word about that. Also, on that kind of reiterates to the last part. So just keep in mind, keep posting, whether you're active or inactive, especially when you're playing inactive seasons. We can just stay on top of those things. And then lastly, inactivation dates. So obviously, what we encourage is that the first billing is April 1st. Many of you know that. And that you must have your rosters cleaned up by March 31st at the very latest. But we do ask as a soft deadline by February 28th that you get that done. So that is coming up here in less than a week. And the reason we do that is because I would hate to see a golfer active in the start of score posting season, plays golf, posts a score, and then all of a sudden realizes that he's been cut off, inactivated because he hasn't paid his money. So I think it creates less confusion for the golfers that if you can take care of it by February 28th, those rosters cleaned up. But you also have, just keep in mind that you must have it done at least by March 31st so that you're not billed incorrectly. We hate to make these changes after the fact, so just please work with your club to make sure your rosters are updated. And then lastly, as you know, score posting starts here next Thursday. So we are exactly 1 week away from getting out there playing golf. It's cold, I know, in a lot of places, but if your golf course is in good enough shape and it should be posting to, then it's just about time to start doing that. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. If you have any questions, you know how to reach us. Give us a call, our handicap department, or feel free to email us. We want everybody to have a great start to their season. Enjoy this weather, snow or sun or whatever it may be. Everybody have a great day, and we'll be in touch at a later date with more information. Thank you.